people do not want performative BS. That isn't what they want. And you can look at the elections of 2018, 2020, and 2022. The more of a performative moron you were, the less share of a vote you got relative to the more traditional Republican or Democrat in your electorate. You see this in the 2022 midterms on the most grandstandy people in the House on both the Democrat and the Republican side were well underperforming the median politician. And even the median politician is rightly really unpopular. But I think maybe the simplest way to think about this is 3 cheers for the American people when they're focused, 2 cheers for the Senate as an institution properly conceived, maybe only 1 cheer for how the Senate functions today because little bits and pieces of it still work, but 0 cheers for tribal politics. And I think the American people really don't like tribal politics. It hasn't worked itself out yet to create clear signals to change the supply side. But I think more and more people get that. And I think you look at the last couple of elections and you see that the people who act like the biggest weirdos to yell all day to one end, to get invited on cable, to yell all night, where less than 2% of the public is ever paying attention, the median voter says, screw that.
And yet they have a disproportionate, you can make an argument that they have a disproportionate amount of power and say in the institution itself. I mean, to cite one example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, everybody's favorite and worst example of this phenomenon, I think, gives a speech 2 weeks ago in which she effectively endorses insurrection, says that if she had been in charge on January 6th, the protesters, the rioters would have been better armed. The kind of thing that even 15, 20 years ago would have gotten you disqualified from politics. It wouldn't have been accepted. And a week later, Kevin McCarthy, who wants to be Speaker of the House for Republicans, touts her endorsement as a reason to vote for him for Speaker. Aren't they getting more powerful? And if that's the Republican Party today, is it a Republican Party worth saving?
So I've probably commented on Marjorie Taylor Greene enough. I think I've probably called her a lunatic enough times that we don't need to linger there. But I think ultimately the GOP is going to have to pick between clown shows and the Constitution. And I don't know anything about how you build a coalition of 218 in the House in a nation that's this divided about politics and policy. So I don't really have anything to say about the House. But I will say, to your point, aren't they gaining more share? I think the Senate election says the opposite, right? President Biden was incredibly unpopular. And yet my party didn't pick up seats, which has happened the second year of every presidency for over 30 years, with the sole exception of W after 9/11 held his own. But every other time, the president loses seats 2 years in because people get elected not chiefly because the Americans regard them as this aspirational genius, but because usually people are voting for the lesser of 2 candidates they're not thrilled about. And then as soon as somebody wins a presidential election, they've confuse themselves and believe they have a mandate, or the Ron Klain type junior presidents confuse the staff and say that they have a mandate, and they start to do a bunch of stuff that overreaches. And so there's a congressional election in the first midterm that's always a correction. We didn't get that this year in the Senate, and it's because we ran bad candidates who were trying to do the kinds of stuff you're saying. Had we run half asleep generic Republicans, we would have won 4 or so more races than we won.